Good afternoon, my friends. This is Paul, and today I'll be reviewing for you Tetris DX for the Game Boy Color, not to be confused with Tetris DS for the DS. They really should have thought of a better name for that so that people wouldn't get confused. Anyway, you might be thinking, oh, it's just a Game Boy Color game, so it's probably just the original Tetris on the Game Boy, but with color. But hey, Link's Awakening DX had an entirely new dungeon that they added, so surely the remake of Tetris would have a similar treatment. As a matter of fact, it's pretty much a completely different game, apart from the basic block dropping mechanics. The menus have been completely overhauled so that they seem a lot less basic. There are now colored special effects when you get a Tetris, as opposed to just the blocks flashing, and the modes actually have names. Like, instead of just A-type and B-type, like the original game had. Ooh, how creative. Now you get Marathon, Ultra, 40-line versus CPU, and even a multiplayer mode. Although, sadly, I did not get to test this out. Now, I don't want to spend too much time going over what the different modes are, because at the end of the day, pretty much all of them boil down to the same thing. You have a bunch of Tetris pieces known as tetriminos, and every time you get a row of blocks the same, they disappear. You've played one Tetris game, you've played them all. Some of the modes include trying to clear 40 lines, trying to clear as many lines as you can within a time limit, going on for as long as possible before you run out of space. Versus the CPU, there's really not much more to say. There's no power-ups, there's no special abilities. You can't even hold the Tetris pieces because the Game Boy Color only has 2 buttons. So whatever Tetris piece you get, you have to end up using it. The blocks do have different colors, but even in the original Game Boy version, some of the blocks had slight design modifications, so I guess that's kind of a moot point. There are 9 difficulty levels, and you do get a special cutscene that celebrates your victory if you manage to go to the highest level, although the cutscene is kind of weird. Like, it involves inflating a bottle and doing various different animations, so part of me was like, is that cheeky game over? Because that doesn't feel like a victory. Now, if you beat 40 line challenge, now that feels like a proper victory, because you get a fireworks demonstration, although I feel like it goes on for way too long and you can't skip it. The simple violin playing from the original Tetris was much more to the point, and I feel like it suited the pick-up and play nature a lot better. One thing that I think is really disappointing about this release is how they handled going against the computer players. Because in modern Tetris games, if you're versing another player or the computer, you would see those people on the other side of your screen, so that when they got Tetrises and sent garbage blocks over to your screen, you could see why it was that you were getting them. It didn't feel like a random occurrence. Whereas in this game, yes, you can select the difficulty, and you can even select ghost data of yourself from an alternate playthrough. That's kind of wild for a Game Boy Color game. But you don't actually see what it is that you're doing wrong. You just see a meter on the left side of the screen that keeps getting increasingly red, and when it reaches the top, garbage blocks appear. Now, the music does intensify as you get closer to collapsing, but that's about it. I feel like this was designed to be played in multiplayer in the original version so that you could see the rage on your opponent's faces when they send stuff over to you, and the feeling just isn't the same due to the small screen size of the Game Boy Color. It feels like even more of a sting when you're using your ghost data, because you're like, I can't even remember what I did in that because all these Tetris matches start to blend together after a bit. You know, that's not the game's fault. The Game Boy Color has such a tiny screen, and it wouldn't be able to fit all those Tetris blocks without you really having to squint and get a microscope. Tetris DX, for the most part, is a much better game than the original Tetris, except for one small problem. The audio design is absolutely atrocious. Now, it could just be that I don't really like the Game Boy's sound font, but I found that the sound effects and the music were just much more high-pitched and grating than they were in the original game. Tetris on the Game Boy had only, I think, 2 music tracks, but both of them were really iconic, and they were on the lower end of the hearing spectrum so that they wouldn't hurt your ears too much. But in this, I actually had to mute my Switch while I was playing it. It was so bad. You do have the option to turn the music off, but then you also have the falling Tetris pieces, which seem like they're shrieking. And I don't want to play a horror game when I'm playing Tetris. So the fact that the game kind of forces you to turn it off is a bit of an understatement. However, I did do a comparison of both versions of Tetris before I did this review, and it did seem like Tetris DX controls slightly better. I mean, they're both Game Boy games, so they probably don't control as well as modern releases like Tetris 99. For what they are, they're responsive. You can actually spin the pieces, which I heard wasn't a thing in some of the early releases. And it's straight to the point. Like, you don't have to deal with fancy loading screens or gimmicks. It's just Tetris on the go. Now, I don't know how much this is pricing on the secondhand market if you're getting this on an actual Game Boy Color, but if you have it on the Switch, I do think that's the definitive option, as you get it as a bonus for having Switch Online. You don't even need the expansion pack. It's available with the base model, and it also has online multiplayer, and you don't have to deal with all those connector cables getting in the way, and you probably can't even get them anymore because they're sold out and too hard to find and too hard to set up. And I believe each player also needs a copy of the game and an additional Game Boy Color, so way to add complication to it. So you might as well just stick to the Switch version, unless you can't find the original Tetris and you really, really need a Tetris game on the Game Boy. So I say if you're picking between the original and the DX version, say which do you like better, playability or sound? If it's sound, by far the original is better, but if you want playability, go for the DX version. I found both to be enjoyable, but the second I only found enjoyable when it was muted. So with that, thank you very much for watching. Please let me know in the comments if you have any questions and how many Tetris games you've played. And until the next time, remember to keep the faith, stay epic, and God bless. Bye!